Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It's your host, Danny Haifong, and I am here with Patrick Henningsen of 21st Century Wire and geopolitical analyst and independent journalist. Patrick, good to see you again.
It's great to be with you, Danny.
Yes, let's hit the like button, everyone, because that helps boost the show in YouTube's algorithm. So, Patrick, I wanted to get to the last, since the last time we were on this show aired. Many things have happened. Donald Trump said that there would be a 5-day moratorium on any strikes on Iran's energy related to power grids and power grids itself. Well, according to Dropsite News, it wasn't even hours after that announcement that the U.S. and Israel struck new energy facility targets, including ones that were connected to a gas line, which was critical to the power plant in Karam Shahar. And there were reports of blackouts. There were also other energy targets that were hit as well. Blackout on this, though, in the mainstream media. And Iran responded. They hit Kuwait. There were reports of drone debris and missile debris that knocked out 6 to 7 transmission power lines there. And there were explosions heard in Saudi Arabia as well, near their oil refineries. And Iran targeted Tel Aviv in a massive way in the last 6 to 12 hours, multiple waves. And this includes 3 destroyed buildings and a promise by Iran that if the United States and Israel hit the power grid in Iran, that they would go for not only power, but also water desalination plants in the region. So, Patrick, assess where we are right now, especially given this 5-day deadline that Trump has set. And it appears that this means very little, as the last 24 hours have shown us.
It's tragic, Danny. Great to be with you. It's really tragic because it seems to be this just inescapable pattern with this president, and every time he is basically feigning to want to negotiate on at least the U.S. side, on every single instance, the Israelis use this as a window to attack, to do the opposite of whatever the United States is saying publicly. So what this looks like is kind of a tag team operation, and Trump is the king of WWF or WWE or whatever. I mean, that's the world that he used to inhabit, and that's exactly what you're looking at with this relationship between the U.S. and Israel, the good cop, bad cop relationship. And he's saying, well, look, we don't have any control over the Israelis. I'm very upset with Bibi and etc. Nobody's buying this anymore. And you know what, Danny? It so reminds me of the Suez Crisis, because the French and the British were doing exactly the same thing with the Israelis. They had a secret agreement that Israel would sort of be the aggressor and on the attack, and then looking like they're going to accept a ceasefire deal. Meanwhile, all 3 parties were just moving aggressively to retake the Suez Canal, and eventually the whole thing imploded and blew up in their face, and the rest is history. And by the way, as a result of that, the world order changed. That was the end of the British Empire's dominance over the Middle East. So there's some historical parallels here. You could say the same thing is happening to this current imperial hegemon, the United States. And they may go the way of the British and the French, which they did in 1956. The U.S. took over in 56, and that was a sea change and brought us the modern geopolitical configuration that we see today. But what's more telling about this, we can talk more about this, Danny, because there's things going on in the background here with this announcement, and I say announcement on Truth Social. This is not through official. This is part of the problem. What are the official U.S. government channels of communication? Is it the State Department? Is it the president having a press briefing? Is it the White House press room, or is it Truth Social? Is it a Twitter platform that's owned by Donald Trump himself? I mean, is that a legitimate communication line for a country that's a world superpower like the United States? Because you can't take it seriously. He tweets out in all caps, and then when he does that, Moments before, we find out now, moments before his tweet, $580 million in oil bets were placed. And guess what happened? Oil prices probably came down. As a result, also what happened was there was a surge in the S&P 500, and you saw an increase of market cap, approximately $2 trillion. $2 trillion. And then the Iranian denial came 2 hours later, and guess what happened? The prices moved in the other direction. The stock market lost $1 trillion in market cap, etc. And then it recovered, and then it came back up again. So it's clear that people who have access to institutional finance or who are putting large sums of money on what should be illegal websites like Polymarket and Kalshi, these sort of political betting sites, but that's nothing compared to what has been leveraged on Wall Street, and we haven't audited that yet. But just this is what I'm telling you now has been reported in the Financial Times this morning. Okay, so and it's what I suspected. It's what I said, and many others like me, but I said this yesterday that this is what's happening, and so Trump is playing with the markets, and he might be, he could very easily shore up the price of oil, to bring it back from 120 a barrel down towards 100 or even below 100 based on announcements he makes. Whether those announcements have any grounding in reality is another matter altogether. And the sick part about this is the White House inner circle, including many members of his inner circle, including his commerce secretary, who's the former head of Cantor Fitzgerald. These are Wall Street oligarchs, okay? And Trump's family as well. Don Jr., his son, is on the advisory board of Polymarket, Donald Trump Jr. And this scam website that people are using for political insider trading is a next level of insider trading. This is just stock tips. We're talking about people betting on political outcomes and things like what we're talking about here. And so I really think this is just the next level of corruption. This is so classic late stage empire. This is something extraordinary. So what exactly is Trump saying, and how does it correspond to reality? Or is this just to move markets and for people behind him to make insane amounts of money?
Well, it definitely appears what you're saying is bearing fruit in reality, but it seems every time Trump does this, there's another escalation that leads to the opposite effect. And I'm wondering, Patrick, if you can comment. It seems like the last, overnight, these strikes, at least overnight in U.S. time, these strikes on Iran's, gas facilities linked to power, linked to water, that they were almost like testing the waters because Iran is reporting minimal damage and minimal impact. I think there were partial blackouts for a period of time, but nothing extensive. And Iran's attacks seem to have been very much in kind, retaliating with the same level of impact. But at the same time, Patrick, that announcement that Trump made, this like ultimatum pushed to 5 days, it also corresponds with U.S. Marines that are coming. It seems like they will be arriving. These multiple MEUs will be arriving at the same time, and markets close on that day. So we have 5 days or 4 days now for the U.S. and Israel to continue to violate the exact thing that they said they wouldn't do. And there's also this escalation on the horizon. So I'm wondering how you have seen Iran's response and all of this. They don't seem phased by this. And given last night's activity, especially in Israel, they seem like they are very much ready to respond to any escalation with something in kind or even harsher, which is what they've guaranteed.
And I would add, Danny, there that we're coming up to the end of the financial quarter as well, final days of the financial quarter. So, and those are things that this White House looks at and reacts to. And so the narrative might change after this financial quarter is over. And then, other commentators have made some interesting assertions that the narrative could change after this financial quarter. So what you're seeing here is a flurry of activity in the last couple of days, and then this could go into a totally different direction. If the U.S. want to reorientate their narrative, they can. It's very easy. You've seen in the previous weeks, Danny, short-term pain for long-term gain, how that talking point was basically that talking points memo, which probably came from either a PR company in Washington, D.C. working for the White House, or it came from IPAC. And then you see that basically repeated by all the news anchors and politicians. So actually, to me, the only organization that has access to all of those, politics and media simultaneously would be an Israeli lobby organization. So so those talking points were beamed out. So we could see a narrative change. They could blame, they could really ramp up the blaming of Iran next week, and then get Americans have very short-term memories. So this is a genetic disposition apparently with Americans. So they can't think past. It's the goldfish syndrome, and they will forget everything that happened over the last month. As long as the media tells them it's okay to forget that and adopt a new narrative. So back to the original point here, Danny, the key point you're making is, so Trump calls off the energy strikes. That was the announcement. And then Israel does the energy strikes, you see. So good cop, bad cop. So Iran basically warned them in advance. They said, don't do it, because if you do, we're going to unleash retaliation on all the Gulf states and Israel. So I can't work it out where the Israelis, if the object is to degrade Israel's infrastructure and degrade the Gulf infrastructure, then this makes perfect sense. But we still have to maintain that possibility. Is that for some people, is this a thing? Certainly I can see from an Israeli point of view and an American point of view. While, and if we go back to that talking point, short-term pain for long-term gain, that wasn't just a panic talking point. That's strategy. So if that's the strategy, then the idea would be to degrade the Gulf states across the board. And that would lead, if the Gulf states are wrecked economically, this would invariably lead to regime change. That these families would have to at some point flee, at least I would say Bahrain, definitely. And the others, maybe not so easily, but they always have an escape route. They have money. They can go to Europe. They can go to America. They can go to Singapore. They can go basically wherever they want, and they could take a large portion of their wealth with them, enough to survive for a few generations anyway. And whatever happens to those countries, probably the U.S. or Israel jointly could engineer coups very easily, military coups. It's really a question of money at that point. That would be the easiest thing for the CIA or Mossad to do, which was to convert a couple of Gulf states into military dictatorships and then promise to have elections in a year or two, whatever. I mean, look at Syria. They put the U.S. and Israel installed the head of Al Qaeda, a terrorist, a wanted terrorist. They installed him into power in Damascus. And the first thing he did, Jolani, when he came into power was, hey, we can't be dealing with this democracy stuff. We've got programs to run. We've got Alawites and Christians to slaughter. We've got their women to kidnap and put on the bridal markets in Idlib. It's too much work for us right now. We'll have elections in 4, maybe 5 years. It's not really a priority. After all, we're terrorists. I think you probably not going to get any complaints if there's a military coup in any of these Gulf states. And then the U.S. and Israel would effectively move to take over the energy infrastructure of those countries to rebuild them. They'll say, we're going to rebuild them. We're going to bring them back online. That would be a plan. And based on what we're seeing now, the complete evisceration and gutting of these countries through this conflict, that would be the sort of, the mop-up operation I would expect. From the Iranian point of view, they're simply exerting deterrence. They're trying to defend themselves, and they're also trying to evict the United States from the Persian Gulf militarily and send a message to these regimes, these family regimes in the Gulf, that this isn't tenable anymore. This old arrangement, it's not going to work anymore going forward. This is a new Middle East, and Iran is going to defend itself and to defend its interest, and also create a security perimeter that doesn't have the United States in it. Because Iran's thinking is that they can fight Israel themselves come what may, but it's much more difficult when they're encircled by American bases in the region and Israel as well, pretending to be an independent actor. But this is a complete pantomime. This is a lie. The U.S. and Israel are running joint operations centers on this war right now. So that's one of the problems, I think, as well, is they're able to do this good cop bad cop thing, which is a source of deception, and it's the same exact good cop bad cop arrangement that the U.S. and NATO use in Ukraine, saying, "Oh, Zelensky, there he goes again, drone attacks on Moscow. Oh, we told him not to do that, especially during high-level negotiations. That Zelensky, we need to have a talking to him. We might have to throttle his funds or whatever." It's not credible. They're getting all of their intelligence, their ISR, their targeting, their equipment. We've got American trainers on the ground running all this gear. We've had American personnel on the ground with the military tech engineers, people running these systems now for like over a decade, and they still talk to you from CNN, Fox, and Sky, and all these ne'er do wells in the mainstream media like this is somehow two separate parties here, that the Ukrainians are independent. It's ridiculous at this point. And anyone who's so stupid enough to continue to swallow this garbage, and they're doing it again with between the U.S. and Israel, pretending that Israel's just not working on its own, and they're not coordinating with the United States. And then Trump can lie to the public. He'll lie. They'll all lie, right? Bold-faced lies to the American and the global public. They'll lie to other world leaders and say, "Oh, we didn't know about that. That's that's a shame. What happened? We'll have a word with Bibi." And meanwhile, we're careening towards World War III. I think at some point the press need to pull their finger out on this and stop entertaining this vaudeville act, because it's just it's not going to be a good result for anybody.
Yeah, and the censorship has been absolutely incredible. Those strikes that we opened with, Patrick, the mainstream media and the collective West not covering them at all, and then of course the retaliatory strikes not covered at all, other than what's happening in Israel right now, which is the biggest impact that is being leveled by Iran right now in its continued operation. But what's an interesting development also, as all of this is happening, we have now Gulf states, numerous Gulf states, saying that they're going to get more involved. Actually, I believe as we speak, Kuwait has just launched HIMARS into Iran. Saudi Arabia, according to the Wall Street Journal, is seeking to not only enter the war, but has been supposedly pushing Donald Trump to continue the war. Hard to know what to believe, actually, with all of that. But nonetheless, it seems like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, according to the New York Times, are itching to not only elongate this war and prolong it, but to get involved in some way. So in many ways, it reflects this dynamic of the United States and Israel essentially creating the very scenario that Iran is warning could lead to massive blackouts, turning the lights out on the Gulf, and as well as maybe their even water systems, given that the U.S. and Israel just tested that out just a bit. They tested out just a bit just to see how far they could get with their lies. But this is the exact same scenario that started the war, right? And, oh, Donald Trump says something, they're negotiating, or he says something, oh, we're not, no war yet, or we're not interested, and then they do it. So this is all, I think, important to note, just given that this is a dynamic that continues to cause whiplash, I believe, for people following. What's your reaction to these developments, especially with the Gulf states supposedly wanting to get more involved in a war that already is having devastating effects for them?
I think you can see reports of this, but I don't think they're all credible. I can tell you these Gulf states, and like I've spent a limited amount of time in the Gulf working, reporting over the years, and I've been to different of these emirates. And look, if there's HIMARS firing from Kuwait, the press will say it's Kuwait firing the HIMARS. It's not. It's the United States. And the same with Saudi Arabia. They'll say, "Well, look at Saudi's very impressive air force there. Saudi's got this. It's got that. That's all U.S. weapons, 100%. all U.S. weapons. It's staffed by U.S. personnel. In the war in Yemen, there are reports that Saudi was short pilots on sorties, so they were employing, quote, retired American pilots to fly bombing runs on Yemen. Okay, contractors or people who are just maybe still active duty. I don't know, but they're flying bombing missions for Saudi Arabia, flying U.S. jets, working with a U.S. tower, U.S. command. I mean, but how far did that get Saudi Arabia after, what was it, 9 years? 9 years of war with Yemen, and Yemen basically kicked their whats. How's Saudi going to fare starting picking a fight with Iran? Honestly, even if Iran's air defenses are degraded, they won't be degraded forever. And not only that, Iran could really, really destroy Saudi Arabia. So the problem with the Gulf states is they're not accountable to their own population. They're not. They only have to maintain this veneer of consent from the population, and then with that, and they have to provide certain things, and it's usually money. They have to pay residents there, and so their constituents are not very big anyway. The constituents for the Gulf, I mean, if you look at the UAE, the foreign residents there vastly outnumber the Emiratis. There's only probably about 300,000 Emiratis that are native, that are there. The rest of the other millions are from countries everywhere else. And most of them are going to cut and run if they haven't already, and divest from these areas. And then what's the other constituency? Well, it's U.S. military, it's U.S. businesses, and U.S. Middle management and contractors, and people, not Eric Prince, but people like that who are in the mercenary business. That's then the only remaining constituency that's going to give legitimacy to the royal families, and that's only extends as far as those people are getting paid. If they're not getting paid, then they could only be there if the U.S. is picking up the tab. And how's that going to work? The U.S. has already made it clear they're not going to put U.S. troops in harm's way, and they've evacuated them from many of these bases. So I'm looking at this story about the Gulf wanting to join the fight against Iran, and it's just not, to me, it's not credible. These families are not born fighters, okay? They are born to hang out in casinos most of the week, and to go watch the race horses at the Hollywood Bowl one week, Royal Ascot the next week, and whatever. I mean, that's their life. That's what their kids have been bred to do. They're not bred to fight wars. And that's not the same. Iran, they're born fighters. Iraqi, born fighters. Lebanese, born fighters. Syria, they're all born fighters as well. So these other Arab countries, it's a different story. But with the Gulf states, forget it. It's not credible. If the U.S. pull out any resources at all, basically they're paralyzed. If the U.S. pull any personnel from Saudi Arabia, they have no military. It's not going to function. So I don't know. I have yet to see anything credible on with those threats from the Gulf. I just don't see it.
Yeah, and it seems to be muddling the understanding of who exactly is in control of these states. We've already seen Wall Street Journal report that despite Saudi Arabia and UAE and other countries saying that they were not going to allow their airspace to be used, they were not going to allow their country to be used as launching pads for attacks on Iran. The Wall Street Journal that's not the case. Actually, the United States has indeed used these countries as launching pads for attacks on Iran. And of course, they've paid the price for them. Patrick, I wanted to get your reaction to the Iranian response so far, in relation to the attacks on Iran's electricity and even its water. There was an interesting comment by the energy minister in Iran who said that Iran generates electricity in a decentralized system with more than 150 power plants built entirely on their own while the Gulf states that surround the region rely on centralized power plants concentrated in a very small area, making them very, very vulnerable. So, all of this seems to be leading to a catastrophic situation for the Gulf states, for the global economy. And then there's this what's coming, it seems like. I don't think that these Marines are coming for zero reason. There's that happening as we hear from the Huffington Post that US troops in general are losing morale. They are very concerned about what they say dying for Israel. So, and that probably has something to do with Christian Zionist superiors telling them that this is about Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus. So
Yes.
there seems to be a massive crisis building, and I'm curious on how you've seen Iran's response to all of this, as much of the mainstream media is now talking about Iran actually having the initiative. Iran can go a long time. Iran has capabilities, and we're seeing all the things that we've been talking about for so long now be admitted all across the Western mainstream media. Now that this is not going so well.
One thing you said there was really important. I'll address, but regarding the power grids, Danny. So right now I'm in my home state of Arizona, so I'm near Phoenix. Now, if I drive out here onto the highway and I look at our power grids, we look at our transformers, we look at our highways, all of it, and I transport myself to Saudi Arabia and Jeddah or Riyadh. And you know what? It's hard to tell the difference between that and Arizona because it's all American. All American. So if you can't get American contractors and engineers to come in and fix and redo everything in the Gulf, then it's not going to get fixed or redone. Iran, on the other hand, is not reliant on any foreign country in order to basically, maintain its infrastructure. And so all of the Gulf states are totally, and that's part of the gravy train. That's part of the deal with them existing, is that they're going to use all these American and British companies, maybe some French. They've divvied out a few to maybe there's even an Italian firm here or there, a Spanish firm here or there, but majority it's American and then some British firms. And they basically do everything in that region. So that's not the case in Iran. So what Iran will do is they will double down and they will rebuild. And for them, it's a war of attrition. They've already, it's bad, it's painful, but they've already priced it in. I'm telling you, the Iranians fought an 8-year war, a proxy war, where the West was arming and backing Saddam Hussein, this supposed evil dictator that they fought the Iraq War over. The United States and Britain were arming and backing Saddam for 8 years while he rained missiles down on Tehran and Iranian cities, and the Iranians lost. Between the Iraqis and the Iranians, I think well in excess of 6, maybe 7 or 800,000. I don't know the totals, but it's equivalent to what the U.S. lost in the Second World War in Europe, just to give you an indication. So over an 8-year period. So they're willing to do that. Iranians will go to the wall to defend their country, to defend their homeland. And they will mobilize. They'll remobilize. Do you think right now? And Americans are so thick. Okay, they're so thick. Do you think after what they've done to Iran over the last 4 weeks, what do you think mobilization numbers are like with young people wanting to join the IRGC? What do you think the recruitment's like right now? Do you think it's down or do you think it's up? And I'm going to tell you, it's at levels right now that they've never seen in their history. It's the same exact thing with Hamas. It's the same with the Hashid right now in Iraq. If they want to mobilize, they could add 150,000 Hashd al-Shabi PMUs, just like it would take one announcement by the Ayatollah, and that's it. That's it. Now all of a sudden you've got a 250,000 strong force, and it won't take long to train them up. And it's the same with Iran. So if this is a war of attrition, the United States better have unlimited ammunition. Donald Trump says we have unlimited ordinances, unlimited air-to-air refueling tankers, unlimited this, unlimited that. No, they don't. They have finite resources, and Israel does not have unlimited interceptors, for their Patriot missiles, which they call the Iron Dome. See, that's
Right.
another thing. It's not Israel's Iron Dome; it's U.S. missile defense, which they supply to and maintain for the Israelis. Okay, it's not unlimited; it's finite. So if you want to play this war of attrition game, Iran is ready to take the short term pain for the long term gain. Just ask Tehran; they've already priced it in. So, but the problem is, and this is the same problem with Ukraine that the U.S. and Europe have run into, is because it's amazing how these people don't pay attention to the long arc of history because all the answers are there. If you look at the Russia-Ukraine situation, clearly a proxy war, okay, but there's a political timeline for Zelensky where he expires. And I think he's past that point now. There's a political timeline for Europe as to how much they can bankrupt Europe and bankrupt the US to support this proxy war. But guess what? Does Russia have a short timeline on that? No. Russia has a very long timeline. The president has a mandate, the government has a mandate to prosecute that conflict and to secure Russia's national interests. And that's a long mandate. It's a long timeline. So they could play the war of attrition for the next 10 years. It's going to be fine for Russia. They'll cope. The same with Iran. The government now has a mandate to defend its country and repel the invaders. And these people, like the Crusaders, basically. So, but there's a timeline on Donald Trump. He's looking at the markets. It's like every 5 minutes, he's probably like, oh, do we stop? Do we go? Do we stop? Do we go? Oh, how much money are we going to make? How much are we going to lose? For Israel, do you think they have an unlimited timeline on this? I don't think so. Very short for Netanyahu's survival. For the Israeli state itself, could effectively collapse as a society if this carries on for another week or two. I'm not exaggerating. You could see huge moves in Israel along these lines. So, but for Iran, where's the pressure on the Iranian government to sign a peace treaty right now? It's not there. So this is the nature of the country, the political economy in Iran, the civilizational dimension. The same with the Russian Federation, and also they're playing on their home field. The U.S. is playing away. So these are just basics, and I honestly, yeah, I don't see how this is going to get any better for Trump, for America, for the Gulf by extending this another. I would say you're looking at total catastrophe in probably 3 or 4 weeks' time. Not to mention a global economic meltdown that's already begun. But politically, Donald Trump is caught in an undertow that is now inescapable politically and historically. So is Benjamin Netanyahu. And so I don't know. I'm trying to look for another scenario that we might be able to build an argument on for some kind of an off ramp, but it's hard to see it.
Well, the reports, Patrick, I mean, what you're saying, it does have a very, I think, rooted basis in reality right now, because there are reports that after Donald Trump announced that they were going to obliterate the power grids in Iran, no one was thinking ceasefire, even after the so-called 5-day moratorium to that threat. And what you had actually were Iranians all across the country around these power plants that the energy minister was talking about, actually forming human circles around them, shielding them and rallying around them, demonstrating that Iranians themselves, they're not only willing to join the military, but they're also willing to put their bodies on the line for the protection of their own infrastructure, which, given the losses that Iran has had to deal with in terms of civilians, in terms of infrastructure, I think says a lot about who has the initiative to continue fighting versus the United States and Israel, which we're already seeing the interceptors run out. There was somebody in the comments who was saying, "Oh, well, what about our lasers?" It must be in Israel. What about our laser? We have lasers now. The laser cannot deal with Iran's hypersonic missiles at the level of their medium range or long range. They are getting through. And every single day now, I've been saying this for the last 72 hours, for the last 96 hours, we've seen the interceptors essentially either be non-existent or fired at a very low level, to the point where they're not even trying to show these videos. We're only seeing this from Iranian sources and independent sources. Israel is not trying to show any impacts at all, because just a couple days ago, they were brutal. We saw what happened to Dimona, and the town that holds the nuclear research facility. And we just now, I'm getting reports that the Rafael defense tech industry of Israel has just been hit. So they're very sensitive targets right now, being hit with basically no defenses present. So all of this is bearing fruit of reality, and it's leading to, I think, a huge crisis, especially given we know that the United States and Israel are ready to take it to this next level. In large part, I'm wondering your thoughts on this, because there really is nothing else. I mean, you have U.S. Marines coming, and you have threats and attempts to carry out these threats on the power grid, on water. Where does it can only get worse from here, Patrick? It seems like, for the U.S. and Israeli side.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I don't want to. I'm not a military strategist, and you can get Scott Ritter or Colonel Larry Wilkerson to opine on issues like if the United States were to deploy Marines to retake Karg Island or try to secure the Straits of Hormuz or occupy any Iranian territory, what's that going to require in terms of air cover by the United States and naval assets that need to be positioned in proximity of that? I mean, they're now exposing all of those different aspects of a military operation, which aren't exposed at the moment because they're basically firing standoff munitions at Iran from a safe distance and then pulling back accordingly to protect themselves. So, I mean, how does the U.S. expect? Do they think they're going to degrade Iran to such a degree that they'll be able to just march in there? This is not Cuba. Okay, you're not going to be able to enforce a siege, military blockade on Iran. It's not going to happen. So, like, what's the plan? Or is this just posturing by the Trump administration? Because the numbers are minuscule. I mean, even the 82nd Airborne, what's the attachment of troops there? I mean, what are we talking about? Even if it was 50,000, it's nothing. They're not, and they will incur losses. Maybe that's the plan. They want to have dead American bodies come back to get the Patriots fired up to support a bigger war. I mean, if that's the plan, well, we'll see how that works out. So, but besides that, we have some fundamental problems with the way the United States are, what they're threatening to do, what they can actually deliver with those threats, and that's the escalation ladder, as it were. So, what more can the U.S. do? I mean, we talked about nuclear weapons in the past, tactical nukes, strategic nukes. I don't think there's an appetite. I hope there's not an appetite to go down that road. I wouldn't rule it out in this case. But there is kind of getting to desperate days here, because the U.S. is going to be running out of munitions. They're going to be running out of assets. They've lost a lot already. There's a record number, and they're probably underreporting quite a lot in terms of drones, aircraft that have been lost, things that have been lost in Iranian missile attacks that have hit U.S. bases. I'm sure this is grossly underreported on the U.S. side. And I don't think the U.S. has incurred this level of losses militarily in any conflict, probably is in our lifetime. And so normally that would mean that, the Secretary of Defense would get fired, would have to resign. The president might be sort of in front of a congressional hearing or a Senate hearing, or somebody from the administration. Somebody will have to answer for these record losses of U.S. equipment and U.S. assets, totaling probably at this point tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions.
Tens of billions, yes.
It's hard to calculate. It's not only that, but the sunken cost of all those U.S. To build all those bases, to protect them, to staff them, what they've put into those bases over the years. The United States, by launching this undeclared war of aggression against Iran with Israel, they're risking forfeiting their military footprint their geopolitical footprint in the Middle East and the Persian Gulf specifically. Now, for somebody that regards themselves as an empire, that's a big thing to risk, and it's a big thing to lose. That we even saw the American and the NATO. There was a NATO attachment in Iraq. They had to cut and run. They basically negotiated a ceasefire with the Iraqi militias, and they left the country. And then, of course, you never negotiate a ceasefire with the United States, or if you do, never believe that they'll ever uphold it, because the U.S. promptly attacked and targeted those Iraqi militias. And what's that again? What's that going to do? It might give Pete Hegseth a dopamine rush for a few hours, and then he can festoon in front of the White House press corps with this silly Captain Kangaroo suit that he wears with the American cravat. I mean, it's just ridiculous, because what he just did is mobilize the entire Iraqi defense and the Iraqi population against the United States again. And if the U.S. tried Iraq, if we were in 2003 now, how the U.S. bought off all of Saddam Hussein's generals, how the amount of corruption that they used to basically invade and take Iraq. And the U.S. had their proxy in power anyway, a Sunni minority ruling over the Shiite majority, which is the colonial model. That's not Iraq anymore. You couldn't do what you did in 2003 in today's Iraq in 2026. So you didn't do yourself any favors. And the United States, if they haven't already evacuated what was their largest embassy, international embassy in Baghdad. It's only surpassed by the fortress that they built in Lebanon in this past year, but they're out of there. It's gone, and these are huge CIA stations as well. So, I mean, so I don't know. It's strategically that's a lot to sacrifice for an empire. So that can't be in the U.S. interest if the U.S. interest is to project power and to contain China, right? Because normally you'd want operational control over the Silk Road in the Middle East, and if they're going to lose that as a result of this errant preemptive war of choice, then anyone who's making the argument that Israel is not the tail wagging the U.S. dog, I don't think it's a credible argument, because the only rational explanation we can have here is that the U.S. have been dragged into, pushed into, and made to fight a war on behalf of a foreign power that has total political control over the entire U.S. legislature and the executive branch, because they paid for that in the last election cycle. That, to me, is the logical argument. But there's people out there making another argument, say, no, don't look at Israel. No, it's U.S. empire, nothing to do with Israel, and so forth. So anyway, that's
Yeah, no, I mean, those are great points, Patrick, because there are also some people who are making the argument that the U.S. empire is hoping to raise the gas and oil prices to such a large degree so they can just reap all the profits and control all energy. But I think what is actually happening in real time is that we have, even if the U.S. empire at this moment does have quote unquote interests to destroy Iran, to, we've talked about those reasons on this show, the multipolar world, Iran sovereignty, all of this. It's the timing of this, and it's also the way it's happening, which is pointing to just major, of course, Israeli involvement in how this war is going. There's just no doubt about that. And the impact is the way that this has ricocheted and backfired. People have been saying, who watched the show, that the Zionists in the U.S. empire, they're not winning big here. They are taking big hits. You mentioned the assets. That number is, they're never going to want to release what that number is, because just these air defense systems alone, whether they're destroyed like they have been, Patriot systems have been destroyed, THAAD radars have been destroyed. We're talking about billions, that alone, let alone the aircraft, all of this that have been shot down, the drones. The bill is high. But there's also the fact that you just said it, the resistance has been reignited. We see what's happening in Hezbollah. Israel is caught in what is going to be a disastrous quagmire to try to occupy Lebanon, losing one at that. And Hezbollah is coordinating with Iran right now. The Iraqi resistance, what you just said about pushing the U.S. back, Iran has said that the U.S. is huddling now with the Barzani clan in Kurdish Iraq, but also NATO has left. So all of the NATO support, all of that, the Polish troops, everyone, they've left Iraq because they are too afraid of the resistance, not just Iranian missiles, but the resistance in Iraq has been activated in a big way. They're conducting sometimes an operation an hour on average, which is causing huge problems. So this is the reality on the ground. And then you add in U.S. troops, you add in Marines, you add in Karg Island, Strait of Hormuz, and you have a real potential for a massive disaster. And if the U.S. and Israel go forward and escalate on Iran's power in water, well, then you have not just an economic crisis, but you have a humanitarian catastrophe that Iran could also ignite if it were forced to do so. So this is not a great equation, Patrick, at this moment. This is kind of the sum of all the parts that I feel is there's a lot of whistling past the graveyard. Yet Donald Trump is saying, in order to ease the markets, in order to buy time, perhaps, is saying, well, we're negotiating with Iran right now, even though there's no such thing happening. So this doesn't feel like an empire that is seeking and winning some kind of full spectrum dominance over energy and the world. I just don't see that. But what's your assessment of that?
No, the net result, the net is that the multipolar world, BRICS as a network is looking more attractive after this last month. I don't think you can argue there. So if I was an oligarch, if I was a billionaire, if I was like Elon Musk with morals and ethics, and I wasn't aloof and whacked out of my head on ketamine all day, like some oligarchs are, I would be looking for a safe place to put my money. And the Asia looks like a much more stable investment environment for capital. So that was the case before the war, and I think that's probably going to be the case after this is over, when this is over, if we survive this. And in terms of the political realities, if you're running a business, or if you're running an investment bank, or if you're running a country, like Donald Trump, you're CEO of America Incorporated, you'd want good information, wouldn't you, in terms of how you're going to position your assets, how you're going to use your resources. You want to be operating on the best possible information, wouldn't you, if you're going to be risking and expending money and capital and resources. That's how businesses operate. The U.S. government is no longer operating like that. And they probably haven't been operating like that for a very long time, because they're able to deficit spend to the tune of, like, under this president, Donald Trump, and with Elon's great Doge revolution. Remember Doge? Oh, Doge is going to fix all this government waste. And what Donald Trump do is add another $1 trillion to the deficit. And so in his first year, I think you'll see deficit has surpassed the Biden administration. And Trump year 2 is going to be you're probably looking at towards $3 trillion in U.S. deficit spending in Donald Trump's second year. So all this theater that Elon Musk was fronting about Doge and how we're going to trim government and that the federal government's got to be more efficient, more accountable, it's the opposite. They're less efficient, less accountable, and they're going to burn through more money. So it's, of course, if you do that, if you have free money available, which this government does in terms of U.S. dollar, we pay for that in inflation. When they drive the deficit up, we pay for that. Ron Paul's been making that argument for 40 years. No one's listened. But if you do that, it breeds corruption. Free money breeds corruption. Look at Ukraine. You inject $300 billion into that cauldron of corruption. What do you get? More corruption, more graft. So this is how the U.S. government's operating. So if I tell you that the Iraqi parliament decided twice to tell the United States to get out of Iraq in the last 10 years, but they couldn't do that because they weren't in a position to do that politically, and also with the level of U.S. The embedded U.S. Mini economy in Iraq, as well as the corruption and the graft and the bribery and all that stuff, the blackmail. It wasn't tenable, but now it is. Now it is. Now the prime minister, the U.S. is trying to prevent Maliki from becoming prime minister because they don't want, because they know exactly where he's going to take this, which is where he took it before, and they didn't like that. So that's a political reality. So I see that. People who are in the region see that. But Donald Trump, everything that I just said, he doesn't know. So the president of the United States is illiterate geopolitically, and he's illiterate. He doesn't watch podcasts like this or listen to the type of guests that you have on who have very good pedigree on these matters. And so the U.S. government's making decisions based on bad information. That's how I have to conclude that. And the argument that this shutting down oil supplies from the Persian Gulf is benefiting, it's a plot for U.S. empire. It's definitely a plot for the oligarchs in the oil and gas sector that are part of Trump's remaining base. You have to remember the coalition that elected Donald Trump. And again, we come back to the political dimension in Iraq, which I just explained. That's real, and it has outcomes attached to it, and along timelines, opportunistic outcomes along timelines. The same in the United States. The oligarchs who helped to bankroll Trump's last campaign, the oil and gas sector, the guys in Houston, the guys in Dallas, okay, those guys, that's one of the remaining, hardcore factions of Trump's base. So MAGA at the moment, the longer this goes on, MAGA is AI billionaires. It's the Larry Ellison and Sam Altman class. It's the Epstein class. It's the oil and gas guys. It's the guys who are fracking natural gas. That's pretty soon. That's all, and Wall Street, and the people who insider trade on Wall Street and Polymarket. That is Trump's base. That's what MAGA has been reduced to. That's where it will end up. And there'll be a few people wearing their red hats who just will believe anything that Trump says and stand there during the rallies and go, like that, put their kids up there in front of the camera. But that's not the same type of coalition that got him a mandate in the last election. But how did he get that mandate? He got that mandate by courting the independents, the populist anti-war votes, the Democrat centrists who swung over to MAGA because Trump said no new wars. We're not going to get involved in regime change wars. That's why they voted for him. So because he has clearly gone the other direction, he's now looking like a political fraud, as is everybody else in his cabinet, including Tulsi Gabbard and all these other people that sang this tune about, no more regime change wars. We can't be putting our brothers and sisters in harm's way. Bring the troops home. So, I mean, it's just not credible at this point. So the oil price spike, cutting off supplies from the Middle East, that will benefit the oligarchs, but that's not going to benefit the American people. That's going to create inflation. It's going to create an economic recession, a depression. It's going to contract economic activity. It's going to make businesses and people less reliable as potential loan candidates from banks. So you have a tightening of lending, a liquidity crisis. All of that is coming with this. So that's not, and the American empire only exists because of the promise that it can deliver prosperity to its people at home. And also, the American empire only exists that it's able to leverage cooperation from its allies and even neutral allies or frenemies internationally through international institutions that have been cultivated since the Second World War. That is the source of American imperial power. And everything that they've done in the last month has undermined all of those things. So if this is some imperial plot, it's a suicidal plot, is the only thing that I can conclude at this point. And I think that's a rational argument. So maybe it's a case of hubris. Maybe it's a case of best laid plans of mice and men. Or maybe it's just a case of this is what happens with late stage empire. The corruption overtakes the rationality, and you see a sort of disintegration of the foundations of that empire. And Israel has been the catalyst. I think undoubtedly is if that's what's going to happen, Israel is the catalyst for this process.
Well, talk about suicide missions, trying to permanently, not only permanently establish a settler colony in the year 20, from 1948 to 2026, and try to expand that model beyond even Palestine is, it could in many ways be seen as a catalyst toward everything that you're talking about, Patrick. And, that phrase, short term pain for long term gain, um, it seems like if you flip that for the oligarchs, it's like short-term gain. Yeah, let's max short-term gains. Disregard all the long-term pain that actually is undermining the very edifice of the system. So, yeah, I mean, sure, make a lot of money off of gas and raise oil prices and all of that, but the petrodollar is intimately connected to what happens in West Asia, Saudi Arabia, all of that. U.S. military projection and power needed to ensure that U.S. economic markets are stable. It's heavily dependent on Israel. So yeah, okay, so yeah, that's a suicide mission because you are essentially building up toward a conflict that leads to win, lose, draw. Right now, it doesn't look like the U.S. and Israel are winning at all. But whatever the outcome, destruction is really that's laid in the wake, and destruction that they can't rebuild. So it's incredibly a risky venture, and I think this is what we're seeing. And not to mention, Patrick, or maybe we can end on this question from someone in the audience who asked, how are troops actually going to get into Karg Island? Is it a death trap? And I wanted you to comment on this, given that Iran has now been with the Strait of Hormuz instituting this toll. Ships are getting in, more ships, European ships, especially Chinese ships, and others, India, Bangladesh, others. They are working with the Iranian government, and Iran has said, yeah, we're exacting a toll for ships to be able to get through here. So they're saying they're in control, and all of Trump's bluster and the U.S. administration's bluster around escalating with ground troops is about either cutting off Iranian energy, Karg Island, or literally trying to intervene in the Strait of Hormuz, all to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. So let me guess, last question: is this a death trap to try to occupy and invade Karg Island? And what you make of now the situation with the Strait of Hormuz, given that all of the U.S. is surging with U.S. Marines, is about this.
Look, you have to ask yourself the question, and maybe this is a gamble on the U.S. part. If they're genuinely sincere, and the Trump or the White House or the U.S. military believe that they can invade and occupy Karg Island, I have a hard time believing that. Maybe the White House, maybe Pete Hegseth thinks he can do that, but anybody in the Joint Chiefs or anybody with actual military experience, real military experience in terms of command and real responsibility for U.S. troops and personnel, not Pete Hegseth, by the way, who's a reservist, whose highest rank was major, who basically didn't do anything of note in the U.S. military other than get quite a lot of tattoos on his body as souvenirs of his crusadership or whatever. But so they're gambling that if they put U.S. assets and troops on the ground in Karg Island, that Iran is not going to besiege them with drones and missiles, because Iran doesn't want to destroy its petroleum storage and distribution and shipping facilities there, because that's essential Iranian infrastructure. The Americans think that is the heart of the Iranian economy right there at Karg Island. That's why they're focused on it. Do you think if the Iranians had to choose between allowing the U.S. to occupy Iranian soil or sacrificing short-term pain for long-term gain, what do you think the Iranians are going to choose based on this behavior pattern we've seen now in the last month, and also historically? I think it's pretty obvious what the Iranians are going to do. Their attitude is, we're not going to tolerate the U.S. on our shores, and we will rebuild our infrastructure. That's the risk that Iran will take. They'll take the short-term pain for the long-term gain. Is the U.S., is America prepared to take the short-term pain of losing a few thousand of our finest troops, sacrificed at the altar of the Donald Trump and the MAGA collective ego or the U.S. imperial ego? Are you willing to take that risk? And so this comes down to the balance of force and the balance of resolve in the region. I would say the balance of force, the U.S. has quite a bit of force that it can impose and inflict on Iran. There's no doubt about that. Quite a lot of damage, and the Israelis too. Between Israel and the U.S., they can impose a lot of suffering, a lot of damage. But and this goes back to the essential political timeline that we cannot take out of this equation. There's a political timeline for all the actors involved. The Gulf, the Americans, the Trump administration specifically, Netanyahu, his government, and Israel as a country, and Iran, and the Iranian government. All of those actors have a timeline, a political timeline attached to their actions. And so I would give the balance of resolve in favor of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I think that's just common sense, looking at this as a basic equation. In the same way, I would give the balance of resolve to Russia in the Ukraine war. And that looks like it's gone in Russia's favor. After all of the 3 years of we're being told that Russia's defeated and the Russian military is a spent force and, they're fighting with shovels running out of bullets. Those were all lies. And so how much of what we've been told about the U.S. and the Israeli military conquests of the last 4 weeks, how much of that is true and how much of that has been exaggerated? Exactly like they did to us, the Western public, with the Ukraine war. I will wager to say, Danny, that it's probably a significant amount of tall tales and fish stories and exaggerations on the part of the United States and Israel in terms of what they've done, that it's going to be the Thor hammer blow that's going to bring down the regime. That hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. What they've done is mobilize the Iranians, not just this generation. The U.S. and Israel have mobilized Iran for the next 2 generations, minimum. And they've sharpened the blade of the Islamic Republic's revolutionary society and government in a way that it could never have been done before. And they've done it. They're responsible for that. And I think the takeaway on this, Danny, the last thing I can say is, I think right now Iran has demonstrated by closing the Straits of Hormuz, but not closing it, keeping it open for their partners on their terms. See, that's the other lie, that Straits of Hormuz are closed. They're not. They're not closed. They're open, but not for everybody. And the reason they're open for those who will abide by the new terms of the new regional hegemon. And the new regional hegemon is the Islamic Republic of Iran, until further notice. Thank you for your attention to this matter. All caps.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to end, Patrick. We're gonna have to keep abreast of all of these developments because this is the direction all things have gone to. I want to thank everyone for joining. I want to thank everyone who joined as new members. I want to make sure everyone knows to go to the video description after this program is over to check out 21st Century Wire, to check out Patrick's Substack. You can support him via those channels. So definitely do that. This was a great show today, Patrick. We'll have to do it again very soon. And we're going to head out of here today. Every single day, there's new developments in this war. And as you were saying, Patrick, with the political timelines, with each and every U.S. and Israeli escalation, it seems like that timeline actually gets shorter. Whatever consequences was going to come out of this timeline is coming faster and faster and faster. The way they escalate, while Iran, we're seeing the response is quite strategic, quite very much methodical in escalating when needing to escalate, and just keeping a general plan of attack at all times, every single day. And the demands that they're putting out there, Patrick, they're pretty ironclad demands that they're not rolling back on, which shows a level of initiative and willingness to stand on their ground for quite a long time. So this is where we're at, everybody. Patrick, any last word before I hit the end stream here?
No, just want to say, yeah, thank you very much for the conversation today, Danny. This is a fluid, ongoing situation. So, disclaimer, everything that we said could be completely irrelevant and null and void by this evening. So, just thought I'd put that in there as a caveat.
All right, everybody. Take care. We'll see you again soon.